Uh-huh. Yeah, y'all. Yeah, y'all. Uh-huh. Yeah, y'all. Y'all. Yeah, y'all. Uh-huh. Yeah, y'all. Uh-huh. Yeah, y'all. Yeah, y'all. Y'all. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah, y'all. Uh-huh. Yeah, y'all. Uh-huh. Yeah, y'all. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Imagine that night, tensions high, a nation torn apart, a plot here in Baltimore City to assassinate a newly elected president on his way to inauguration and to plunge the country into chaos. Abraham Lincoln disembarked at this train station and under pre-dawn skies made his way unscathed and on to greatness. In the days ahead, we may face a crisis of similar proportion, an outlaw president clinging to power and defying the will of the people. For 4 years, many have said there will come a moment. Well, this is the moment, because this ballot is like none ever cast. Now, I'm a lifelong Republican, and I'm still a Republican. But this ballot is how we restore the soul of our nation, electing a good man, Joe Biden, and a trailblazer, Kamala Harris, and ensure an orderly transfer of power. Or plunge our country into chaos. America or Trump? I choose America.
The Lincoln Project is responsible for the content of this advertising.
The Forum 2, exclusively on YouTube Live, weekdays from 9 a.m. until 10 a.m. Central Standard Time. We tackle the tough issues, political, social, cultural, and racial. It may not be what you expect to hear, but we will definitely give you what you need to know. Check out our website, theforum2.com. Call in live, 414-395-0484. Check us out. Good morning, welcome to the program. Today is the first day of in-person early voting in the city of Milwaukee, October 20th, 2020. So of course we're going to talk about the polls, the early polls being open today in the city of Milwaukee. And there are a couple of reported inconsistencies already at the Washington Park Library site at 7 a.m., an hour before the location open. There was a line of about 25 people. Line is slow moving at Washington Park. I'm going to be getting pictures shortly from a variety of different polling locations, and then I'll post those pictures in the group. So if you are planning on voting today, you'll know exactly what to expect once you arrive at the location. So that's a fear that I had. And when the Election Commission put a call out probably a couple weeks ago that they needed a couple of hundred additional staff, not volunteers, but actual paid staff, that means that they were, at least at that point in time, they were not prepared for what the voter turnout was going to be or was expected to be with the start of early voting. And so with some of the lines that we're seeing, and Midtown, I received a message a couple minutes ago that Midtown is actually in bad shape. I'm going to be getting some pictures from the Midtown voting location shortly. But also, please know that all of the early voting sites that exist, certainly in Milwaukee and maybe even in the state of Wisconsin, the Midtown location, and it's called Midtown because it's in the middle of the city, has the highest performance as far as in-person absentee voting. So the bulk of the resources and volunteers and paid staff should be at Midtown, and I'd like to think that election officials projected that. We do have a new executive director of the Election Commission. Now, she's not new to election administration, but she is new as far as leading the department, and I just hope that we are prepared for 2 weeks of what I believe to be very heavy voter turnout. And this is all very good news because I know that a lot of you blame the Black people in 2016 because the Blacks didn't vote. And I had to check an awful lot of people over the last 4 years because some kind of way, somebody got some numbers, whether they were accurate or made up. And there was this number that was put out there of the number of Black people that didn't vote in 2016, therefore blaming Hillary Clinton's loss on Black people. And I find that rich. When white women voted for Donald Trump at a higher number than Hillary Clinton, it was almost expected that Black people were going to help fill in the shortcomings for white people that didn't want to vote for the white woman. Today, we are going to get into some of the more specific details because we just talk about the Black vote like it's just one solid thing, like the Black vote. Like there's no variation, like there's no variation of opinion, like there's no, deeper understanding of racial issues when it comes to the vote. Yes, the African American vote is considerably more democratic than any other demographic group in the country, but there's specific reasons for that. And so also there's this, I think, a false interpretation because culturally we think we know each other. We don't know each other. Well, I think Black people know white people better because our lives and our entire world is just surrounded by whiteness. I mean, we're only 13, 14% of the population, which we may actually be less of the population because the census count has stopped early. But we are much more familiar with the expectations of white people and white culture. And some of that is being general. I'm generalizing a little bit, but not much. And so when you talk about what white politicians do with their limited view, and what they try and do is they hire Black staff and they hire Black people to, help write their talking points and help them message in the Black community. And that helps only to an extent, because if you're an African American that has ever been a staffer on a white campaign, and I will put together a plan which I know will make sense and will resonate with and will be respectful of Black people and the Black vote, but I have to give that plan to somebody white who just doesn't even really understand it. Like they'll try to understand it, but if it doesn't make sense to them in their racial view and their racial understanding, I'm gonna have a tough chance, trying to implement the entire plan because the person I'm giving it to doesn't understand. And so to try and mitigate that, what white politicians will do is they'll pick somebody Black, or they'll get a bunch of Black endorsements. Or they, in the case of Kamala Harris, and we're not here to debate Kamala Harris's Blackness, I'm gonna leave that up to other people. You pick a Black running mate because once they think that once we see another Black person, that's gonna galvanize more Black support. And that's just a kind of a narrow-minded view of how you get the Black vote. And so today what I wanna do is go into a little bit more detail that how we, as the single most democratic constituency, interprets the signs and the signals that we get from the party that we favor the most, and that is the Democratic Party. Because there's actually much more nuance. But when you see that, and I got a story here, I got a bunch of them, where 90% of the African Americans are going to vote for Joe Biden, you would just assume that we all look at voting for the Democrat and voting for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, that we all view it the same. We actually don't. There was no corresponding jump in Joe Biden's polling with African Americans. And the thing about polls that we get, the sample size of African Americans is usually very small. It's not the proportion of African Americans that vote for Democrats, which is going to be 90%, is the proportion of African Americans in the American population. So if we're only 13 or 14% of the population, then any poll that you see, it probably won't even include 13 or 14% of African American respondents. And so it's not very clear on the sentiments and the understandings that African Americans have when we cast our vote for the Democratic candidate. I'm going to try and clear some of that up so we can get a much more thorough picture. And so another example would be, there were a lot of you that thought, oh, when Joe Biden picks Kamala Harris, his approval rating or the percentage of Black people that are going to vote for him is going to go way through the roof. It didn't move. There was no statistical measurable increase in Joe Biden's support amongst African Americans by picking Kamala Harris. I'm going to get into details about that in a minute. Good morning, Tammy Reed. Vanessa Garrett, good morning to you. Tammy Reed says, slick background. Isn't this my background every day? Or no, the beginning background is colorful. Tammy Reed said, wow, that ad. I actually want to play that ad again because I think my background that I'm displaying right now came in a little bit sooner than it should have. So that Michael Steele ad, I'm gonna tell you what, guys, the ads that we have seen, and Joe Biden is absolutely killing Donald Trump on the Wisconsin airwaves in the Milwaukee market, which if the Milwaukee market, so when I say the Milwaukee market, it is the television viewing audience in and around southeastern Wisconsin, which includes the metro area of Milwaukee. That is where the state of Wisconsin is won. It's not that we don't want people in Hudson and Eagle River and what else is up there? Like Bayfield, Wisconsin. Like we want those people to vote too. But my zip code of 53210 can probably, like there's more Democrats and more Democratic votes will come out of my single zip code than out of like Pepin County, St. Croix County, and Columbia County. So my zip code can outvote 3 or more Wisconsin counties. So that's good. That's like extra votes, extra butter for the mashed potatoes if we can get more votes from those smaller population centers in northern Wisconsin. But the turnout in Milwaukee is going to be paramount to carrying the entire state. But don't forget, Trump only won Wisconsin by 23,000 votes. And we very well could best that number this morning with all the early voting sites. We very well could. So we'll get to that in a second. Tutu Reeves says, good morning, all. Like the bumper music tribe called Quest. Sandy J, good morning. Gail Williams, good morning, all. Too early for Michael Steele. Going for some coffee. I like when Republicans say screw Trump, right? Because Trump thinks that he always brags about the one number that Trump is proud of, if he's proud of any number, if Trump even knows what numbers are, certainly not coronavirus numbers. He says, oh, I got 80 or 90% approval with Republicans. So every time there's another Republican that comes out against Donald Trump and endorses Joe Biden, that strikes at the core of one of Trump's central arguments. Because remember, Trump is real petty. So we got to get petty. I wish we didn't have to get petty with the presidency, but we got to get petty with the president because the president is real petty. Joe Biden at the last debate said, shut up, man. Will you shut your mouth, sucker? So we got to get petty. And so if there's Republicans that are willing to make a commercial, make an ad, and say that they are supporting and endorsing Joe Biden like that, you got to get Donald Trump. You got to get him personally. Because our politics have become very personal these days. I wish they weren't, but the other thing is, so we have 2 weeks. This is going to be the longest 2 weeks of our lives. This is not going to go quickly. We will not enjoy this. When November 3rd comes, and I have to figure out what I'm going to do on November 3rd. I don't know where am I going to be here all day? Am I going to be out wearing Army fatigues out in the war zone of the city of Milwaukee? I don't know what I'm gonna do. But when the election when the last poll closes in America, so like 10 o'clock Central Standard Time, I think the last poll closes, and that's probably Hawaii. That's where it starts. That's where the accusations of fraud, that is where the voter suppression tactics are going to be revealed, all the inconsistencies. I assure you this, when we wake up on November 4th, and I don't want this to be the case, but I know it's going to happen. I know it's going to happen. When we wake up on November 4th, if we even sleep, how are we even going to sleep that night? There will still be people in line to vote somewhere in the United States of America. Mark my words. When we wake up the next morning, somebody would have stayed in line all night. Because if there's an election where you don't go home until you vote, where you don't go home, we saw that Donald Trump only won by 77,000 votes out of 130 million cast. 77,000 votes is like 2 Milwaukee suburbs out of the entire country. And so you don't want to be that person that said, oh, the line was longer than 30 minutes and I just went home and I didn't vote. You don't want to be that person. So if there is an election where people are going to stand in line all night, and also expect the last person to vote in this nation to be an African-American, probably somewhere in the South, because they do this thing intentionally. We have as a per capita in America, African-Americans have fewer polling locations in our neighborhoods, and our drives to polling locations are usually longer. Not in Milwaukee. I can legitimately walk to my polling location. I'm not going to, but I could. Good morning, Curtis Cook, Denise Jones. Good morning, people. Rise and shine, she says. Glad you guys are in such a lovely mood. Eileen Seeger, good morning. Shouty, it's your birthday. Eileen, you spelled shouty totally wrong. 50 Cent, he's another one. Do we need to talk about that? Do we need to talk about rapper people? Ice Cube, there's others, right? Shaq said he voted for the first time, which is disappointing. Ice Cube, who his business associates are friends with the Trump family, so I'm not shocked that Ice Cube had access to the president and met with him. 50 Cent is another one who just read or got some information about the Biden tax plan, and 50 Cent had a 50 Cent fit and said, oh, you better vote for Trump, or whatever the hell he said. There's a level of political immaturity in our community. I think, let me not say that, because political immaturity exists everywhere, but because it's widely understood, if you are 70 years old or younger and you're Black, chances are there have been a lot of conversations at church, at home, at school, in your social circle, in the community about voting for Democrats every single election like clockwork, to where you really don't have to think about it. You will think about the issues. You'll think about what's going on specifically in your community as it relates to jobs and healthcare and infrastructure and education, but you vote for the Democrat. And so for a lot of African Americans, especially those that never really cared about politics and never paid attention, because our lives are generally consistent. Progress is slow. And so from day to day, week to week, month to month, year to year, Black life has a general theme to it. There's good days, there's bad days. It's over the long view that Black life slowly begins to improve. But day to day is pretty consistent. And so if you have that just general consistency, and you don't pay attention to politics anyway, you just have this level of political immaturity. And so now that everybody's paying attention, I'm getting sick of the phone calls. I'm getting sick of the text messages. But with all of that intense outreach, and part of that outreach we asked for, because Hillary Clinton didn't do enough. She didn't come to Wisconsin. Hillary Clinton didn't. And so the party listened, like, oh, okay, you didn't get enough Hillary Clinton in 2016. We'll show you this time. You're going to get bombarded. And so now what that does is it gets more and more people to pay attention. When you constantly bombard the phones and the text messages and the ads that we're seeing and the digital ads, I can't even go to YouTube. I got to go to YouTube, check the channel, see what y'all talking about, make sure y'all ain't cussing me out on the YouTube. There's a YouTube commercial just waiting for me. Right when I go to YouTube, it's just a commercial just waiting in queue. It's always Barack Obama telling me to go vote. I've seen that Barack Obama YouTube ad 74 McTrillion times. And then infinity plus one. But with that increased outreach, and plus Joe Biden has a lot of money. Joe Biden has raised probably $800 million since September 1st. That's a lot of money. $800 million is like, that's a lot. That can buy everybody a Tesla. Well, actually, not everybody. But with all of that increased outreach, more and more people get involved. And now we're starting to see how politically immature some Black celebrities are. They just didn't know any better. So if they read a tax plan literally for the first time in their entire lives, do you think 50 Cent ever sat down and went through an entire federal budget or a tax plan? Of course not. So somebody sent him some information. He was like, oh my God, the taxes are going to be really high. I'm going to vote for Trump. There needs to be a class or some kind of instruction for Black celebrities to know what they're talking about when they want to speak about anything political. Otherwise, they sound like idiots. But again, we love artists and actors and rappers for their acting and their rapping and their art, not their political commentary, because some of them have the political common sense of a fourth grader in Argentina. Good morning, Diana Beckham. Tyrone Bates Libra says, salute. I salute you right back. Alden Higgins says, morning, my brother. I say morning right back. Denise Jones, did Cube and 50 Cent just wake up? It seems to be about them and not the people. They need to go just listen and vote. Well, it's totally about them. Well, I shouldn't say that. But if you're a rich Black person, you got to protect that wealth, because think about how many rich Black people we've seen that have just filed bankruptcy. Like, they're really rich. MC Hammer, perfect example. MC Hammer was MC Hammer. And if you're under the age of 30, you missed a real specific era of hip hop that you don't understand what it's like to wear polka dotted diaper pants and do the Running Man. You don't understand that. So MC Hammer, who was a superstar in his own right, really took hip hop and dance music and pop music and just it exploded on the scene. And I would say, so between like MC Hammer and Will Smith and other popular rappers at the time, they took hip hop culture and they made it so incredibly mainstream to where it's become a global phenomenon in the last generation. Black celebrities have a real hard time hanging on to their money, so they do make it about them. And if they think that they can be negatively impacted by a tax plan that nobody ever explains to them because they don't even listen to their accountants, if they did, some of them wouldn't go broke. They don't say, oh, I need to do this because it's better for the collective. Rich people in this country always have a level of insecurity. Black rich people especially, because it just takes one Wesley Snipes situation, and not only are you broke, you're going to be broken in prison. And so I can understand how they may be feeling insecure that their wealth may be threatened, but that's because nobody's ever really explained to them the interplay of taxes and income taxes. And if you're a celebrity and you have all these different tax shelters, you can have all these different nonprofits. Do you guys remember a long time ago when you would watch an NFL game, those of you that didn't boycott the NFL, you would always see these commercials for the United Way, or maybe I'm just an old person with a really good memory. You would see a game would be on, and they'd always show like NFL players working with the United Way. And a lot of NFL teams and players donated and supported the United Way. I haven't heard anything about the United Way in many, many years, but that's essentially a tax shelter for these NFL players that are making millions and millions of dollars, but do not want to pay millions and millions of dollars in taxes. Or you'll have basketball players or football players, whatever high paid athletes will have foundations. Hi, my name is Karan Johnson, and I have a foundation to help put kids into sports programs in their school. Hello, my name is Jerome Smith, and I have a music foundation so that we can get music back in the classroom. And maybe they genuinely are concerned about some of those causes, these professional athletes, when they have these foundations, but it's so they can donate to a nonprofit so they're not paying all these taxes. I spent way too much time on that. All right, let's get into some stuff here. Let me rewind time because there was some the racial divisions that exist within the Democratic Party are serious. They're specific, and they probably need to get dealt with because very early on, when you had a variety of Democratic candidates vying for the nomination, you had Kamala Harris, you had Joe Biden, of course, you had Beto O'Rourke, you had Bernie Sanders, you had Julian Castro, you had Eric Stowell, Amy Klobuchar. Remember, she gave her announcement in the snow, and then her hair had snow in it. Black people were firmly behind Joe Biden. Even before Joe Biden formally entered the race, he was polling higher. And I think that made some of our more liberal progressive counterparts in the Democratic Party very upset because darn you blacks, don't you know what's good for you? Bernie Sanders is going to be best for you. No, Bernie Sanders is going to be best for you. We had our minds made up that it was going to be Joe Biden, and that's very complicated and it may vary from person to person. But the easiest way I can explain it is that if Joe Biden was good enough for Barack Obama and Barack Obama was good enough for us, then Joe Biden is good enough for us too. Real simple, a little bit more complicated than that, whatever. That allowed us to at least temporarily see past the 1994 crime bill, which for some odd reason, white people are stuck on. White people wanted the 1994 crime bill more than we did, but now all of a sudden it's a problem. So that's a whole different conversation. And we had to have these discussions with the woke that couldn't understand why the blacks, and they would like shame us. And we're gonna call you to the carpet on that, but let's win this election first, and then we're gonna come back and get you. But African Americans that had early support for Joe Biden pissed off the Bernie Sanders people because the Bernie Sanders people knew that if they couldn't get black support for Bernie was not going to get the nomination. And guess what? Bernie didn't get black support. He didn't get it in 2016. He didn't get it in 2020. And so, of course, the progressives that think, not all of them, some of them are cool, some of them are just as racist as their counterparts on the right. Because they think they know best for Black America. Don't even have a black friend, won't shop at a black store, don't support black businesses, don't want to be anywhere near a black neighborhood, but they think that their candidate knows best for black people. No, black people know what's best for black people. Don't worry, we're going to get into that. And so the support for Joe Biden in the black community is very specific, but it caused a lot of issues early on when there were so many other candidates. Why are black folks defaulting to Joe Biden? And if you don't know that, then you probably need to do some further investigating and study on the interaction between black people, black culture, the electoral process, policy, and progress in civil rights. Let's go to CNN. Exactly 2 weeks before Election Day, Joe Biden appears well positioned to finish the job that Democrats, above all, hired him to do. And this is what's key. The key to black support for Joe Biden early on, which was bigger than it was for Beto, bigger than it was for Bernie Sanders, bigger than it was for Amy Klobuchar, even for Kamala Harris. Wouldn't you think that black people would have or even Elizabeth Warren? Elizabeth Warren got a little bit of black support. Some black women loved them some Elizabeth Warren. I knew she wasn't going to make it. And I don't want to be judgmental on people's personalities, but a presidential primary process is judging their personality. Their policies are all the same. For the most part, like there's only maybe a 10 or 15% variation between any of those Democratic candidates that were vying for the nomination early on. They're all going to vote for the same stuff. Some of them have a couple of original ideas, but Congress isn't going to pass their original ideas. Most of them are exactly the same. Elizabeth Warren was just so extra. She was, and so as a contrast, Amy Klobuchar wasn't extra enough. Right? So I know people are going to get mad at me because I'm judging women's personalities. When you enter into the political fray and you want to be president of the United States, all bets are off. No more political correctness. We're going to talk about you because you put yourself out there for us to talk about. And the talking about you as a Democratic potential nominee is called the primary process. We judge those people. One of the specific reasons why African Americans prefer Joe Biden is because living and getting by in America with this much melanin in your skin means there is a different type of code in which you must live by. Can't do and say all the things that other races and cultures do, because other races and cultures don't have the same interaction with American society and law enforcement and American policy and the American education system like Black people do. So what we did is we saw that there were white working class voters who for a period of time were more important to the Democratic Party than African Americans, even though we are the bedrock of the party. It was, oh my God, Hillary lost white working class people to Trump. And there's some truth to that. And so we as Black people know that we're going to vote for the Democratic nominee just about no matter who it is. We then needed to get behind a candidate that white working class people would also get behind. Part of our support, not all of it, for being with Joe Biden early on is because Joe Biden could best have the conversation and make the case to white working class people that Black people cannot. I can't go to Pennsylvania and Ohio and make the case to white folks. Joe Biden can. That's why Barack Obama picked him. And Barack Obama got elected not one time, but 2 times, because Joe Biden can have the conversation with the white people that otherwise would be racist. Joe Biden gave Barack Obama a level of credibility with white working class voters. So, and we saw that, we learned that. We are students of this discipline as Black people. We have to be, because if we're not students of this discipline, we're in a lot of trouble. And so doesn't it make sense for us, because we're going to support the Democratic nominee with a 90% voter turnout number, or 90% of Black voters are going to vote for the Democratic nominee. Let's get somebody that can get the whites that we can't get. We use Joe Biden to help manipulate white working class voters. That's a secret. Don't tell anybody. And that's not the only reason why we're supporting him. But if there is one candidate who is best equipped to get the white working class voters that Hillary lost, it's Joe Biden. So what that does is it makes our decision to support him a little bit easier. And when we see it that way, that Joe Biden can help get some of the voters that Hillary Clinton lost, now you'll have Black people getting even more invested in the campaign, because we need to get the white folks that prefer to vote for Republicans. And that's the other thing that we don't discuss. It's always this heavy burden on Black shoulders to vote, and to vote early, and to vote often. You have all these people telling us to vote, and the Blacks need to vote, and Milwaukee needs to vote. Y'all are not having those same conversations with sometimes the person you live with, you're married to, the person you share a roof with, the person that you break bread with, your people at work, because they're all going to vote for Trump, and you just don't say anything about that. But a Black person comes out and says they're not going to vote, or they're undecided. Y'all have a fit. Start having a fit in your own house before you come knocking on our door. And I think that's a fair thing to say. Back to the article from CNN. Biden's principal asset in the 2020 Democratic primaries was the widespread sense among party voters that he was best qualified among the contenders to win back the defecting white voter, especially those without college degrees who allowed Trump to capture Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania in 2016. Now, with a wide array of public polls consistently showing Biden leading in all 3 states, defending Minnesota, which Trump has targeted suspiciously, and running almost step for step with the president in Ohio and Iowa, 2 Rust Belt states Trump won more easily last time. With remarkable consistency across these states, polls show Biden benefiting from similar dynamics as he attracts a solid majority of 55% or more of college-educated white voters, a preponderant majority of around 4/5 of African Americans, and about 2/5 of whites without a college degree, a number that, while modest, represents a clear improvement over Hillary Clinton's anemic showing with them in 2016. That's the key. Our support for Biden is in part because he could get the working class, white, non-college educated voters that Hillary Clinton lost, and we as Black people and as true Democrats cannot engage them in political discourse. It is much more sophisticated than anybody ever wants to give Black voters credit for, because you see, oh, Black people, they're going to vote for the Democratic nominee no matter what. You are correct. But if we can use our powerful vote for the Democratic nominee to manipulate white folks, then why wouldn't we do it? Black folks are not dumb. Jay says this election seems to be greed over social concerns. I think there's some social concerns. I think that both Democratic nominee and the Republican incumbent have made mention of riots, protests, looting, civil unrest, policing is on the ballot. And they're having very different conversations about those two scenarios. But the social concerns that have marked the year 2020 have reached the campaign. But here's the other thing. We got to be real clear about this because, again, people are going to want the president, whether it's Joe Biden or Donald Trump, to fix everything that's wrong in our own neighborhoods and our own communities. You know that we have 83,000 elected officials in the United States, but there's only one president. But for some reason, while the president does have a fair amount of power, the president is also checked by Congress and by the courts. We have 83,000 local elected officials that can have much more emphasis on the social concerns because those politics are local, but we ignore them. Like our city budget determines what policing looks like in my neighborhood and my community, more so than what Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have on their website about policing. And so when we talk about social concerns, don't let local elected officials off the hook. It's almost like we pretend the county board doesn't exist. We pretend the Milwaukee Common Council doesn't exist. We pretend that the Waukesha aldermen and alderwomen don't exist. We pretend like the Wauwatosa Common Council doesn't exist that has the power to make their cops wear body cameras. So social concerns are a local issue. Now there's national overtones, but what the president and Democratic administrations can do is fund the local initiatives that we come up with to address social concerns. They can provide the money. Lemon Harris says, vote for no other reason than they don't want you to. Fair enough. Jay says, Biden is the only alternative to Trump for independent-minded voters. He's not our first choice, and Democrats want to remain in office, needs to present better candidates. Biden, he wasn't a lot of people's first choice, but again, this like now more than ever, isn't this about life or death? By the time we get to 2021, if we get to 2021, the year 2021, which is technically like 2.5 months away, seems like it's 20 years away. Like this year has just been. Biden wasn't really hardly anybody's first choice, not on style, not on personality, not on articulation, but this election is life versus death. At its bare essence, 500,000 people are going to be dead by the time we get to 2021. 500,000 people. And so you can weigh that, or I wish Joe Biden was much more supportive of environmental causes. We all do. But when it's life versus death, some of the smaller micro issues, because there's one issue voters that are out there, but we all should be one issue voters because it's life versus death. If Donald Trump gets reelected, the United States of America will live with the coronavirus forever. Because even if they come up with a reasonable vaccine, the way Donald Trump is going to talk about it and promote it and make money off of it, and his family is going to get rich off of it because he's going to invest in it, because with him, there is no emoluments clause. He's just ignored it. If Donald Trump can find out where the money is going to be spent in this country, including making pharmaceutical companies have to put in higher bids and all sorts of other stuff like he did with the PPE, we're going to live with the coronavirus forever. There will always be a city in America, and it'll be just a part of the background music, of the regular news that we get every single day, our local news. Columbus, Ohio has to go into lockdown. Now in other stories, the Brewers win the World Series. Miami, Florida is seeing, this is in the year 2025, 2026. Miami, Florida is seeing a spike in coronavirus cases. Now back to you, Herbert. Now is not the time for perfection. And I say if there are people that are looking for political perfection, either have a higher focus on local offices or run for office yourself. I considered it many, many years ago. I was like, I don't like these politicians. I'm going to run for office. Then I quickly reconsidered. All right, guys, we're going to get into some nuances here so we can so some of you can get a better understanding of how and why African Americans choose to vote for Democratic candidates. And this one comes from literally one of my favorite political websites. It's 538. I got to say that right. 538.com. And then 538 refers to the number of US senators, delegates, and members of the House of Representatives. So it's 538.com. Really good detailed information. Another good website if you like numbers and data and statistics, which I know is rare these days for people to believe in data and numbers, statistics, and science, is the Pew Research Center.org, P-E-W research.org. From 538.com, because most national and state polls include only a small number of Black voters, we rarely get the opportunity to take a detailed look at how preferences and opinions vary within the Black community. Too often, the national political discourse never gets beyond, quote, the Black vote, full stop. But this year, at least 4 different groups, the Democracy Fund plus UCLA Nationscape Polling Initiative, Morning Consult, the African American Research Collaborative, and HIT Strategies are conducting surveys with bigger samples of African Americans in the run-up to the 2020 election, and issues of race and systemic racism have dominated stretches of the campaign. And also keeping in mind that race and systemic racism is on every ballot every 4 years. It's on every ballot in every midterm election. When there are cities that have larger numbers of African Americans, it's on every ballot for mayor. So as far as those specific issues and those social issues that someone referred to in the comments, those issues don't leave some voters' minds ever. But now, because this current election is life versus death, the shortcomings and inconsistencies of Joe Biden pale in comparison. They can say whatever they want about Hunter Biden and Burisma. That is why Donald Trump wants this Thursday's debate, and I highly recommend you watch this last and final presidential debate coming up this Thursday. That's why Trump wants it to be about foreign policy. Because all they're going to try and do is tie Joe Biden to Russia and to the Ukraine, because Donald Trump himself is tied to Russia and Ukraine. Candidates are getting similar levels of Black support to past nominees. According to recent Democracy Fund polling, 83% of likely Black voters favored former Vice President Joe Biden, 10% favored President Donald Trump, and 8% said they didn't know which candidate they will back. Recent Morning Consult polling found almost exactly the same thing: 84% for Biden, 10% for Trump, and 7% undecided or favoring a third-party candidate. So it seems likely that Biden will end up winning close to 90% of the Black vote, with Trump winning around 10%. As experts on Black voting say, undecided Black voters tend to consolidate to the Democrat as we get closer to Election Day. If that happens again this year, Biden's roughly 80-point margin over Trump among Black voters would be fairly typical for US presidential elections, meaning this: if Biden wins, it's Black voters that did it. We have to compete with whiteness in this election. Even though it's been clearly illustrated, has it not, that Trump puts poor white people, I would say, not only in the same basket, but that basket is even lower. Donald Trump is going to these cities, these towns, to have these rallies. La Crosse, Wisconsin, Janesville, Wisconsin, I consider them both small towns because there really are no big cities in Wisconsin. And these are people that follow the president. If you're going to go to his rally during a pandemic and not wear a mask and not social distance, you are so mesmerized and hypnotized by Donald Trump that Donald Trump is manipulating those people. And he is, and you can't call it anything but that. If you call it something other than complete manipulation of people, then Donald Trump is probably manipulating you too. But he doesn't care about the health and the safety and the well-being of his own voters. Now, he doesn't care about Black people, doesn't care about immigrants, he doesn't care about dreamers, he doesn't care about children in cages, but he's not rallying those people together during a pandemic where we know that people are going to die because they attended a Trump rally. Herman Cain, a former Republican presidential candidate himself, is dead because he attended a Trump rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And so that's the part that I don't understand. At the very least, care about the health and safety of the communities of your own voters. Now, will he use, nasty language in referring to his supporters? No, he talks to them like they're pets, like they're children. But at the same time, his actions show he doesn't care. And I say that because maybe there was a point in time where I thought Donald Trump didn't know the coronavirus was dangerous, or he was just so ignorant, not just plain out dumb, just stupid, that he couldn't mentally grasp what the coronavirus was until we heard that phone call. And he said it to Bob Woodward. He's like, oh, yeah, it's worse than the flu. Oh, it's so contagious. Oh, you know what, Bob? It can even be spread in the air, that coronavirus. But then he would go out there and tell people that it was a hoax. And he would have rallies. I also posted on Facebook yesterday, Donald Trump didn't get the coronavirus. He didn't get it. Nope. I was like, you know what? He wouldn't do that. He wouldn't mock 200,000 people that lost their lives to this virus. He wouldn't pretend to have it. He wouldn't do that. Yes, he would. For a moment, I had a lapse in judgment because I gave Donald Trump a shred of human decency and morality. He has none. He didn't get the coronavirus. There is no way that someone who is 74 years old, that is not in the best shape, we know how terrible he eats, we know he doesn't get exercise, even his annual physical is complete lies. All the medical professionals that are, like when his doctors talk about him and how his health, it's something you would hear from North Korea, like how North Korean doctors and medical professionals would talk about the supreme leader. That's exactly, oh, the president is in wonderful physical health. He must have perfect genetics because Donald Trump could live to be 200 years old. Do you remember when the White House physician said that a few months ago, said Donald Trump is in such perfect health, he can live to be 200? If that's not some dictator, fascist, I'm scared they will behead me if I tell the truth about the president nonsense, I don't know what is. Trump was like, I'm going to use the coronavirus because it's in front of everybody's minds. It's a huge concern. And I'm going to say that I got it. We're even going to say that other people in the White House got it, whether Hope Hicks got it or not, whether Melania got it or not. I don't know, but they're in on the gig. White women are always in on the gig of what the white man wants to do, whether it's throughout history, maintaining slavery, whether it's oppressing people. The white woman has always been there. So if Donald Trump says, here's the marching order, we're all going to get coronavirus this week. Yes, sir. And I'm not demeaning white women. I'm demeaning the white women that have been supporting people like Donald Trump and the theme of Trumpism in America since the beginning. We're going to get the Rona this week. Melania, you're going to get the Rona this week too. Okay, I will get the Rona this week. Be best. And he used it to consume the news cycle, to talk about experimental drugs, that if they are these experimental drugs are, created by these publicly traded pharmaceutical companies, their stocks will go up. There is no way that Donald Trump would have recovered like 3 days, like 4. There's no way. I just don't believe that. He has every high risk factor for the worst symptoms of coronavirus. And so what he'll do is he lied to the American people. And why we would believe him, and I was an idiot, I believed. I was like, oh, ha, he got it. Because the way he was so reckless with it, you would think that he would eventually get the coronavirus. Donald Trump is still the president of the United States. And even though it looks like he's acting reckless, remember, he's made for TV, guys. It looks like he's out there being reckless. Everybody that was around the president at all times was tested incessantly with the accurate test. So he wasn't going to get the coronavirus. Remember, that is a threat to national security if the president gets sick. If the president gets the coronavirus, then our enemies could find an easier way to attack us and exploit our vulnerabilities. Remember, Mike Pence was never handed the power of the presidency, but if he legitimately had the coronavirus, which has killed getting close to 250,000 people, there would have been a brief transfer of power, and that we would have known about. It didn't happen because Trump didn't get it. But he used it to consume the news cycle, to prop up these experimental drugs. And so the pharmaceutical companies that may be traded on the stock market, their share value will go up because Donald Trump's economy is nothing but the stock market anyway. The whole thing was contrived and we bought it. And he was like, I feel invincible. Remember when he said that on the campaign trail? I'm immune now. He never got it. They made sure that Donald, because think about how embarrassing that would be if he died from the coronavirus. That's worst case scenario. And so when he was on the phone with Bob Woodward, and he was talking about, how contagious it is and it's airborne, he said it's even worse than the most strenuous flus. And I believe that that was an actual true conversation. Trump knew, he's like, I can't get this. He's already a dictator. He probably ordered everybody in his circle, everybody in the White House, because there's some people that had more contact with him than others. And there were other legitimate people in the White House that probably got it because of how they may interact with the public. So I believe that, but they were kept away from the president. And when we found out about the first person in the White House that tested positive for the coronavirus, that wasn't a part of the actual administration, they probably put Donald Trump into more of a protective bubble. Because if he's getting protected by the Secret Service, then the Secret Service also has an obligation to make sure he doesn't get an airborne contagious virus that even Donald Trump admitted he knew how dangerous, deadly, and contagious it was. He never got it, but he can pretend he got it, fly in the face of almost 250,000 people that have died because of it, and then say, it's nothing to worry about. Because if Trump was on a ventilator and if he was really, really sick, then nobody would go to his rallies. Remember, he needs the rallies. He feeds off of that kind of narcissistic attention. Loretta Cunningham says, I agree with you 100%. This is life versus death. I'm tired of explaining this to people. I mean, some people aren't going to get it. They're not going to get it. Denise Jones, I don't think he had COVID either. No way he rebounded like that. Liar, liar. Show Me Love says, vote pretty please with sugar on top. Show me love. You ain't got to convince anybody in here. I think everybody in here gets it. I think we understand. Let me get back to the story from 358.com. You know what I should do? I should just post the link to this particular story because I want people that consider themselves allies to have a much more intelligent and intellectual understanding of why African-American voters support the Democratic Party the way we do. And also, it makes us a subject for ridicule because they'll say, oh, you Black people are so stupid. What has voting for the Democrats done for you? And then we got to go through that whole thing. And when you're having a conversation with someone who does not understand history, you're better off walking away from the conversation because it's like arguing with a brick wall. Except a brick wall would probably learn something faster than this person. But I could turn around and say to people that vote for Republicans, especially, small town poor white folks who've lost all their businesses, lost all their jobs, that still continue to support Trump because the economy is gonna something that I don't know about. So Trump 2020. That's not why they're voting for Trump. They're voting for Trump because Trump hates the same people they do. It's not about what Trump can do for them and provide for them. It's not even about another stimulus check. It's that Donald Trump has got the largest platform on planet Earth to spew hate. When you're a small town person, nobody's listening to you. You're not important on the world stage, but if you have a leader that can amplify your sentiments to everybody else in the world, for them, that's enough to earn their vote. It's really sad, but it's also something we're going to have to deal with in perpetuity, at least for another generation, because Trumpism is going to be solidified in federal courts and on the U.S. Supreme Court for a while. And oh, by the way, Joe Biden should pack the Supreme Court. Pack it. If you got to appoint 3 more liberal justices to dilute what the conservatives will do, because conservatives on the Supreme Court are going to view America like Trump does for 30 years. We can't have that. That's undemocratic. That's immoral. In some cases, it's illegal. It's unethical. So if we got to pack the court, that's why Biden isn't answering. I know what he's going to do. He's waiting to see if the Democrats can get the majority in the U.S. Senate. And then when cases like the Affordable Care Act and other provisions of it or Roe versus Wade come to the court, those things can be maintained. And I'm going to say this. Donald Trump says, well, we won the Senate. We have the presidency. We can do whatever we want because the American people voted, and they voted for me, and they voted for Mitch McConnell and the leaders as leader of the U.S. Senate and majority in the Senate. Okay, cool. So when Joe Biden wins and the Democrats get the majority in the Senate, they can do whatever they want to. See how that works? There's no way America can survive. And when I say survive, our democracy is already like 10% life support, right? Our democracy is on a ventilator. It's been on a ventilator since January 20th, 2017, right? We do have some hope coming up in 2 weeks. We're really starting now, but it's been on life support. A conservative U.S. Supreme Court, including these federal judges that Donald Trump has appointed, and none of them have been Black, that he has appointed for lifetime terms, will plunge this nation into civil war. Trumpism will still live and breathe in these judicial philosophies of the people he put on the court. Now, we don't see that right now because we're consumed by this other bright, shiny thing, the election that's in front of us. But this era of America doesn't just go away because Trump loses. And so if we have to go to extreme measures, and packing the court is an extreme measure, I will give you that. But you're going to sit here and tell me the Republicans didn't go to extreme measures and most of y'all didn't say anything. You just complained or you posted on Twitter like, I don't like what Trump is doing. We actually have to go to extreme measures, but in the right moral direction. So if you got to pack the court to do it, people are voting. They want to vote for a Democratic Senate, Democratic House, and a Democratic president. It's the will of the people, right? See how there's a double standard? When the Republicans do it and they say that they have the majority, well, we have a majority of the state assembly seats, so we can do whatever we want, including not passing any legislation. I think America has gotten used to a particular type of complacency from the Republicans, because if you just maintain whiteness and racism and white supremacy, you don't have to pass any laws. Because there's too many laws on the books that are anti-white supremacy and anti-racism, where now you don't pass anything and let America still simmer in its racist history. When people ask the question of why these Black people always vote for Democrats, I would ask why some white folks continue to vote for Republicans. I posted a picture yesterday in the Forum Facebook group of the 20 counties with the highest coronavirus death rates. So out of all it's like 3,100 recognized counties in America, something like that. These have the highest death rates. They're all in red states except for Nobles County, Minnesota. So if you're in a red state, Republican legislature, Republican governor, you're going to have more coronavirus deaths. And so I would ask those people, why would you, for what reason are you voting for Republicans? Because not going to make this connection. You got a Republican controlled state, you're going to have more coronavirus deaths. Don't believe me? Wisconsin, save for our governor. And I think the Republicans here have spent more time trying to take power away from Tony Evers than trying to work with him. We are the coronavirus hotspot in the country because of Republicans' reluctance and pure unwillingness to care about their own constituents. It's like they'll sacrifice an unlimited amount of their people. No feelings, emotions, no sentiment toward them whatsoever, so they can also hurt the Democrats at the same time. It's the most amazing thing I've ever seen. And I think that when history looks at this moment in time objectively, we will not ever get out from under the dark cloud of ridicule, including you woke folks, because they're going to ask, well, if your ass was so woke, like, what were you doing? Well, I got mad. I used to. We're all in this together. We're all going to get blamed for this. Denise Jones, sure, when you are so right, white women follow their man, they will drink the Kool-Aid. Yeah, and we can also have a conversation about feminism, but that will get intensely racial. Ooh, they would. But I mean, they know. White society, Western society, let me use an even bigger word, Occidental, OCC, Occidental society is patriarchal. It follows the lineage of the man. The man is the owner, the controller, the decider, the decision maker, the property owner, including laws on the book saying that a woman is a man's property. They are patriarchal societies. So whatever the man says, including marginalizing women, his own wives, his own daughters, his own mother, that's just how the society is set up. Even throughout religion, it's very patriarchal. Like some religions I think are allowing it now, but like there couldn't be women of the cloth, like women priests and women bishops, because it's all patriarchal, right? African society is matriarchal. And so that is a fundamental difference because it has always been matriarchal in our families. The history of the power struggle, not just in America, but we took it and we contorted it here in America, like, oh, the strong Black woman. No, the strong Black woman was the queen in African nations. In sub-Saharan Africa, they were all matriarchal societies, and that is the tradition that has continued here in the United States of America. So there was no real need for a feminist movement to separate the ideologies and philosophies of women, specifically white women, from their white caretakers, husbands, fathers, etc. Black women never needed a feminist movement, which was white women who were sick of the cut they were getting out of white supremacy. They were getting shafted, yet they were supporting white men in every step of Jim Crow and being against civil rights and owning and maintaining slaves. White women were right there. Now, there was a couple of them that were abolitionists, but not enough, because they didn't see their fate tied to the most oppressed people in this nation. White women did not see that until Reconstruction. When Black men, this is what sent shockwaves through America as much as, if not more than, the Civil War itself. Black men got the right to vote almost unequivocally in 1866 because of Reconstruction. And part of that was because it was punishment to the South, because if you had Black people in bondage and then the slaves were freed and then you give them suffrage, they could begin to participate in a democracy to further stamp out white oppression by electing Black people to be the caretakers of a neglected Black society throughout the 200 years of slavery. That's why the Klan formed. The Klan formed as opposition to Black suffrage, because even back then, white folks knew if these Black people get the same kind of power that we had, we are screwed. And so then you have the largest domestic terrorist organization the world has ever seen. And I'm not talking about Al Qaeda. I'm not talking about Hezbollah. I'm talking about the KKK. And they still exist and they still infiltrate parts of our government. And so you have different offshoots and different, sects of white supremacy, but the KKK, even though they're low rent, tobacco chewing, toothless rednecks, they spawn the movement, the organization of white supremacy. The mechanization of it, the industrialization of white nationalism through the KKK. So when Black men got the right to vote, white women had a fit. They're like, wait a minute, what about us? No, in fact, and then you had poll taxes and you had, all these other, Jim Crow was born essentially. So we had the right to vote, and there were, Hiram Rebels was the first African-American ever elected in America. He was a state senator from Mississippi. You had African-American presidential candidates. You had African-American members of the US Senate, because back then Congress picked members of the Senate. And so there were Black legislators until they intimidated us with every bit of power that they had to stop us from voting, and poll taxes and literacy tests and all this other stuff. And if you have a literacy test to be able to vote, then you defund education to where Black people, it's still difficult for us to get a good education to learn how to read. In fact, in the southern states and in the colonies, it was illegal to teach Black people how to read. That was very much on purpose. And so 1866, Black men get the right to vote. White women didn't get suffrage until 1920. So that is what, 54 years the white women had to sit and watch Black men vote. Now, legally, Black men could vote, but of course we had voter intimidation and voter suppression and Jim Crow. But that just goes to show the white women, while they were in on the gig against Black people, they got screwed too. And so then the feminist movement in many different forms, it's always existed, but then when it became much more organized and then it became the Equal Rights Amendment in the 1970s, 1960s, 1970s. Black women didn't need to participate in that. That was white women and their beef they had with their men. We have always had matriarchal societies where it may not seem like it. There's so much respect that Black men give Black women because it is in our lineage. Melissa says, we know. I know you know, Melissa. I know. Melissa, you're a suburban revolutionary. I hope you don't have a Biden sign in front of your house. That might make you a target. Let me get back to the article from 538.com. It's interesting that Trump appears to be turning some white people against him in part because of his controversial racial comments, but he hasn't really lost any Black support. And he might even do a little bit better this year than he did in 2016 with Black voters, which is weird. Of course, that's largely because he had so little Black support to begin with. There isn't much room to do much worse. But there is a core block of about 10% of Black Americans who are Republican leaning, and they appear to be sticking with Donald Trump. Indeed, the 2020 numbers suggest that it might be hard for Democrats to replicate the 90-point margin among Black voters they had in 2008 and 2012, with Barack Obama running as the first ever Black major party presidential nominee. Protests and the Harris pick for VP didn't have big, long-lasting effects. Neither the protests in the wake of the police killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis in late May, nor the selection of Kamala Harris, the first Black and Asian American vice presidential nominee, resulted in big and durable boosts for Biden's Black support. And so I alluded to that earlier because in our minds, they were already made up. In fact, our minds were made, not all, but enough Black minds were made up to where Joe Biden swept the southern states in the Democratic primary process. Because remember, Bernie Sanders was winning in those first 3 or 4 contests. I think it's Iowa, which was a mess. The whole Iowa caucuses needs to be disbanded immediately. Then it's New Hampshire. Then it's Nevada. And then I think we may get to the southern states. So I just want you to look at that for what it is. And when people say, oh, the Democrats are racist, well, Democrats are a phenomenon created in America, and America's root and foundation is race. And so when you look at the first 3 states that vote on their primary contest, they're majority white states. You can't get much whiter than Iowa. You can't, unless you go to New Hampshire. That's pretty white. Nevada, while becoming much more diverse, it's still 60+%, if not more than that, white, and Democratic turnout is better than 60% in Nevada. So when white people vote in those first Democratic primary contests in Iowa, in New Hampshire, and in Nevada, you get a false sense of the direction of the Democratic Party. Now come the southern states, the Mississippi primary, James Clyburn in North Carolina or South Carolina, whatever, one of the Carolinas saying, I know Joe and Joe knows us. And then Joe Biden swept those southern states and basically got enough delegates just out of the southern primaries to just about solidify the nomination. That's because we knew that Joe Biden could get the white working class, non-college educated whites that Hillary Clinton lost. That's not to say there's been absolutely no movement in the Biden-Trump race among Black voters. Biden's biggest lead among Black voters came throughout June following George Floyd's death and in the early days of the protests against police brutality. That makes sense. Scholars have found that because of past experiences with discrimination and prejudice, Black people are more likely than other racial and ethnic groups to view their fate in a collective way. The George Floyd killing and the weeks of intense national discussion about systemic racism against Black people, particularly their treatment by police, likely increased feelings of collective identity among Black Americans, given the renewed salience of issues surrounding policing in Black communities. So I'm going to leave it there. But before I leave it there completely, I do want to play the Michael Steele ad again, uninterrupted, because it kind of got cut a little bit short this morning. So with that, thank you guys. Appreciate your participation. So I'm going to be receiving pictures from people that are going to various early voting locations in the city of Milwaukee, and I will post them in the forum Facebook group. So if you were looking to go and vote today on the first day of early voting in this presidential election cycle of 2020, you may know what to expect from various polling locations. And I'm gonna go like, here we go.
Imagine that night Tensions high, a nation torn apart, a plot here in Baltimore City to assassinate a newly elected president on his way to inauguration, and to plunge the country into chaos. Abraham Lincoln disembarked at this train station and under pre-dawn skies made his way unscathed and on to greatness. In the days ahead, we may face a crisis of similar proportion, an outlaw president clinging to power and defying the will of the people. For 4 years, many have said there will come a moment. Well, this is the moment, because this ballot is like none ever cast. Now, I'm a lifelong Republican, and I'm still a Republican. But this ballot is how we restore the soul of our nation, electing a good man, Joe Biden, and a trailblazer, Kamala Harris, and ensure an orderly transfer of power. Or plunge our country into chaos. America or Trump? I choose America.
The Lincoln Project is responsible for the content of this advertising.